The Varathian research vessel cut through space like a blade of ice, its metal hull reflecting the dim red light of the dying star below. Everything about the ship screamed efficiency. No wasted energy. No unnecessary decorations. Just cold, calculating purpose. On the bridge, Commander Veltros stood perfectly still, his 3 eyes locked onto the scanner display. His species had evolved past the need for constant movement. Every action had to serve a purpose. "Commander, scan complete," the science officer called out, his voice monotone and flat. "We've identified the object. It's a stellar dragon." Veltros's mandibles twitched. That was the closest his species came to showing excitement. "Are you certain?" "Positive identification, sir. It's one of the architects. Biosignatures are present but extremely weak. The creature is still alive, though barely hanging on." The bridge crew gathered around the main view screen. Through the endless darkness of space they could see it. Massive didn't even begin to describe the creature. From its enormous head to the tip of its tail, the dragon measured at least 200 meters. Maybe more. It drifted through the void like a ghost ship, slowly tumbling in the weak gravity of the dying star. Once, this creature must have been magnificent. Its scales probably shimmered with the light of 1,000 suns. Its wings could have stretched wide enough to block out entire planets. But now it looked like something pulled from an ancient tomb. The scales were cracked and dull, like old pottery left out in the elements for too long. Some had fallen away completely, leaving dark patches on its hide. The wings were torn, barely more than tattered membranes hanging from broken bone. "The architects," Veltros said quietly, almost to himself. "I thought they were myths. Stories told to children." "They're real, sir," the science officer replied. "According to our database, they're older than most civilizations in the galaxy. The legends say they sang stars into being. That they shaped entire solar systems with nothing but their will." Veltros studied the dying creature on his screen. Whatever power it once held was long gone. "Wake it up. I want to extract any useful data from its memory. Something that old must know, things we've forgotten." The medical officer looked uncertain. "Sir, the creature is in severe distress. Reviving it could." "Do it," Veltros interrupted. "Now." The revival beam shot out from the ship, a pale blue lance of energy that struck the dragon's massive chest. For a long moment nothing happened. Then, slowly, the creature began to stir. Its clawed hands twitched. Its tail moved slightly. And then its eyes opened. Those eyes. Even half dead, even fading, they held something the crew had never seen before. Depth. Wisdom. Entire galaxies seemed to swirl in those ancient pupils. It was like staring into the birth of the universe itself. The dragon tried to lift its head. Its massive neck muscles strained, trembling with effort. But it couldn't. The strength just wasn't there anymore. Its head fell back against the asteroid it had been resting on, and the creature's breathing came in ragged, painful gasps. "Get me a full medical scan," Veltros ordered. "How much would it cost to restore it?" The medical officer's fingers flew across his console. Numbers appeared on the screen. He went very still. "Commander, the biological systems are 97% degraded. To fully revive this creature, to restore it to even minimal functionality, would require resources equivalent to terraforming 3 worlds. The energy cost alone would bankrupt a small star system." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The Galactic Council had strict rules about resource allocation. Efficiency above all else. Progress over sentiment. The needs of the many over the needs of the one. Veltros made his decision quickly. That was what good commanders did. Extract what data we can from its neural patterns. Use passive scanning. Don't waste energy on active procedures. We'll take what we can get and move on. "Sir, the creature is conscious," the medical officer protested weakly. "It's aware of what's happening." "That changes nothing," Veltros said coldly. "It belongs to a dead era. The universe has moved on. So must we." The Galactic Council representatives on board didn't even need to vote. They all understood. Sentiment was a weakness that lesser species indulged in. Advanced civilizations like theirs knew better. They nodded their approval, and that was that. 2 hours later, the Varathian ship prepared to leave. They'd extracted what little data they could from the dragon's failing mind. Fragmentary memories. Partial star charts. Nothing particularly useful, but standard procedure had been followed. The dragon had been moved to the surface of Theros 9, a barren moon orbiting the dead star. They left it in a shallow crater, its massive body barely fitting in the depression. The creature was too weak to protest. Too tired to fight. It simply watched with those ancient, knowing eyes as the alien ships powered up their engines. Not one of the crew looked back as they departed. The dragon was just another relic now. Another piece of history that had outlived its usefulness. Alone in the crater, the dragon's consciousness began to flicker and fade. So this was how it ended. After millions of years. After nurturing countless civilizations. After singing songs of creation when the universe was still young. This was the reward. Abandonment. Rejection. Left to die alone on a cold rock circling a dead star. The dragon's eyes started to close. Darkness crept in from the edges of its vision. Its heartbeat slowed to almost nothing. Then just before the end, something pinged on its failing sensors. A new ship. Small. Primitive by galactic standards. But it burned with something the dragon hadn't felt in ages. Curiosity. Wonder. Hope. The human vessel entered the system and everything changed. Riley Bennett pressed her face against the cold observation window of the new horizon, her warm breath fogging up the glass in little clouds. She wiped it away with her sleeve for the third time in as many minutes, not wanting to miss a single second of the view. Space stretched out before her in every direction, endless and beautiful and terrifying all at once. At 17 years old, Riley was the youngest xenobiology apprentice in the entire human exploration fleet. She still couldn't quite believe she was here. She'd practically lived in Captain Harris's office for 2 weeks, begging for this assignment. Her parents thought she was crazy. Her friends back on Earth said she was wasting her youth on a boring research vessel. But Riley knew better. Out here, among the stars, was exactly where she was meant to be. Riley. Hey Riley, you seeing this? Dr. Thomas Grant called out from across the room. He was hunched over the scanner station, his face lit up by the glow of multiple displays. Get over here right now. These readings are completely insane. Riley practically ran across the bridge, her heart suddenly pounding in her chest. Dr. Grant was her mentor, and she'd learned to recognize that tone in his voice. It meant something big. Something unusual. What is it? She asked, crowding in beside him to look at the screens. Look at these biosignatures from Theros 9. His finger traced across the data streaming across the display. That moon down there is supposed to be completely dead. Nothing but rock and dust. But I'm picking up life signs. Massive life signs. And I mean massive, Riley. Whatever's down there is huge. Riley's eyes went wide as she studied the readouts. The numbers didn't make any sense. The life form was enormous, easily the size of a small building. Maybe bigger. But the vital signs were so weak, so faint, that the scanner could barely detect them. It was like watching a candle flame about to go out. Something's alive down there, she whispered. Something ancient. And it's dying. She turned and practically shouted across the bridge. Captain Harris. Sir, we need to investigate this. Right now. The Varathian observer stationed on their ship made a sound like air hissing through broken pipes. His name was Threxus, and he'd made it very clear from day one that he thought humans were primitive, emotional, and generally a waste of space. That moon was surveyed yesterday by a Varathian research vessel, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. They found nothing of value. As usual, humans are wasting time on irrelevant curiosities. We have a schedule to maintain. Captain Harris stood up from his command chair. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen more than most people twice his age. He'd been in space for 30 years and he'd learned something important during that time. Sometimes your gut knew things before your brain could catch up. Dr. Grant, prep the shuttle, he ordered. Riley, you're going with him. Full environmental suits. We don't know what we're walking into down there. Captain, I must protest, Threxus began. Your protest is noted, Harris said calmly. And ignored. This is still a human vessel and I'm still the captain. We investigate unknown life signs. That's what we do. 20 minutes later, Riley was strapped into the shuttle beside Dr. Grant and 2 security officers. Her hands were shaking inside her gloves as they descended through the thin atmosphere of Theros 9. The moon was gray and lifeless, covered in craters and ancient dust. Nothing had lived here for billions of years. Except something was alive here now. The shuttle landed near a particularly large crater, and Riley was the first one out the door. She ran forward, her suit's boots kicking up small clouds of dust, and then she stopped dead in her tracks. Oh my God, she breathed. The creature in the crater was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen, even in its current state. It was a dragon. An actual real dragon. Easily 200 meters long, with scales that must have once shimmered like diamonds but now looked dull and cracked. Its wings were spread out on either side, torn and ragged like old cloth. But its Its face was noble and ancient and sad. Tears immediately filled Riley's eyes. She couldn't help it. "It's still alive," she whispered, moving closer. "Dr. Grant, it's still alive." She knelt down in the dust beside the dragon's massive head. Her scanner was going crazy, showing faint neural activity and a heartbeat so slow it barely registered as life. But it was there. The creature was fighting. Still fighting, even though it had been abandoned here to die. "Riley, be careful," Dr. Grant warned, but she barely heard him. She reached out with one gloved hand and gently touched the dragon's scaled head. It was cold. So cold. How long had it been lying here? "We should return to the ship immediately," Threxus's voice crackled over the radio. He'd insisted on listening to their communications. "The Galactic Council has deemed this creature inefficient and not worth saving. By interfering, you risk humanity's membership status. You risk everything your species has worked for." Riley looked up at Captain Harris, who had joined them on the surface. Tears were streaming down her face now. "Sir, we can't just leave it here. We can't. Look at it. It's still fighting to live. That has to mean something." Captain Harris stared down at the dragon for a long moment. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 2 years. 2 short years. They were the new kids, the primitives, the emotional ones who didn't understand how things worked. Every other species looked down on them. Interfering with a Galactic Council decision could cost them everything. But as he looked at his young crew member, kneeling in the dust beside a dying creature, refusing to give up, he realized something. Maybe being human meant exactly this. Doing the right thing even when it was hard. Even when it cost you everything. "Get the cargo bay ready," he said into his radio. "We're taking it home." Riley's heart soared. "Thank you, sir. Thank you." As the crew began preparing the heavy transport harnesses, the dragon's eye suddenly opened. Just one eye, just for a moment, but it focused directly on Riley. And in that instant she felt something. A connection that went beyond words or thoughts. A plea. "Thank you." A tiny spark of hope in an ocean of endless despair. Riley leaned in close and whispered, "Hold on. Please just hold on. I promise we won't give up on you." The eye slowly closed again, but Riley could have sworn she felt something like gratitude wash over her. They were going to save this creature. Whatever it took. The New Horizons medical bay looked like a disaster zone. Cables snaked across the floor in every direction. Monitoring equipment that was meant for human patients had been jury-rigged and modified to work with something completely alien. Dr. Thomas Grant stood in the middle of it all, running his hands through his hair for what must have been the 100th time that day. "Riley, I need to be honest with you," he said, his voice tired and frustrated. "I'm a doctor for humans. I spent 8 years in medical school learning about human biology. This creature. I don't even know where to start. Its cellular structure is nothing like anything I've ever seen. The organs don't match anything in our database. I'm flying completely blind here." Riley hadn't left the dragon's side in 36 hours. She sat on a small stool next to its massive head, surrounded by monitors and medical equipment. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, making her look older than her 17 years. Her uniform was wrinkled and stained with coffee. Her hair was a mess. But her eyes burned with a determination that hadn't dimmed even slightly. "We'll figure it out," she said quietly. "We have to." She'd been reading everything she could find about stellar dragons. The human database didn't have much. A few legends. Some ancient texts from other civilizations. Fragmentary reports from explorers who claimed to have seen them from a distance. Nothing useful. Nothing that would help her save this creature's life. But Riley kept reading. Kept searching. Kept hoping. "Dr. Grant, look at this," she said suddenly, pointing to one of her monitors. "See these readouts? Watch what happens." A nurse walked past the dragon, talking quietly on her communicator. As she spoke, the dragon's heart rate increased slightly. Its brain activity spiked. When she moved away and the room fell silent again, the readings dropped back down. "That's been happening all day," Riley explained. "Every time someone talks near it, plays music, or even just sits here reading out loud, its vital signs stabilize. It's like the dragon is responding to our presence. To our emotions." Dr. Grant leaned in closer, studying the data with narrowed eyes. He pulled up readings from the past day and night, scrolling through them quickly. Riley was right. The pattern was unmistakable. Whenever humans were nearby, especially when they were showing emotion or connection, the dragon's condition improved. Not much, but enough to measure. "That's impossible," he muttered, but even as he said it, he knew the evidence was right there in front of him. Biology doesn't work like that. Cells don't respond to emotions. Maybe ours don't, Riley said softly. But maybe theirs do. Maybe that's how these creatures survived for millions of years. Maybe they fed on connection, on relationships, on the bonds between living things. Before Dr. Grant could respond, a proximity alert screamed through the ship. Red lights flashed. The intercom crackled to life. All senior staff to the bridge immediately, Captain Harris's voice commanded. We have a situation. Riley's heart sank. She knew what this meant. In the briefing room 5 minutes later, the situation became crystal clear. 3 Varathian warships had entered the system. They were massive vessels, each one easily 10 times the size of the New Horizon. They'd taken up positions around the human ship, effectively boxing them in. The message from the Galactic Council was short and brutal. Surrender the Dragon within 12 hours or face immediate sanctions. All trade agreements would be terminated. All protection under galactic law would be revoked. Humanity would be expelled from the galactic community and left to fend for themselves in a hostile universe. 12 hours, Captain Harris said, looking around at his senior staff. That's what they're giving us. We need more time, Riley spoke up, her voice cracking slightly. I think I know how to help it. I think I understand what it needs. But I need time to try something. What exactly are you proposing? Dr. Grant asked carefully. Riley took a deep breath. This was crazy. She knew it was crazy. But it was their only chance. The Genesis Protocol. The experimental terraforming technology we've been developing. It uses advanced nanites for planetary reconstruction. If we could adapt it, modify it for a living being. The room fell completely silent. Every person at that table knew what the Genesis Protocol was. It was cutting-edge technology that humanity had been developing for years. The idea was simple. Send billions of microscopic nanites to a dead planet, and they would rebuild it molecule by molecule, creating an atmosphere, oceans, even basic plant life. It was revolutionary. It had also never been tested on anything living. The risks were enormous. The nanites could rebuild tissue, yes, but they could also tear it apart if the programming wasn't perfect. Riley, that technology is completely untested, Dr. Grant said slowly. Using it on a living creature, especially one this large and this alien, it could kill it instantly. Or worse. It's dying anyway, Riley said, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked through the observation window at the massive form of the dragon, its chest barely rising and falling. Without this, we're just keeping it comfortable while it fades away. We're just prolonging the inevitable. I won't accept that. I can't. Captain Harris studied the young woman sitting across from him. She was exhausted. Probably hadn't slept properly in days. But there was something in her eyes that reminded him why he joined the exploration service in the first place. Hope. Stubborn, unreasonable, impossible hope in the face of terrible odds. You have 8 hours, he said finally. After that, I have to make a decision about what's best for the entire crew. For all of humanity. Make those hours count. Riley stood up so fast her chair nearly fell over. Thank you, sir. Thank you. She ran back to the medical bay, her mind already racing through calculations and possibilities. Dr. Grant followed more slowly, his face creased with worry. Riley placed her hand on the dragon's massive scaled head. It was still cold. Still barely alive. But she could feel something there. A presence. A consciousness that refused to give up. I'm not giving up on you, she whispered. I promise you that. Whatever it takes, I'm going to save you. The dragon's breathing remained shallow and labored. But somewhere deep in Riley's heart, she felt something like an answer. Like the creature had heard her. Like it believed her. Now she just had to make good on that promise. Commander Veltros didn't bother with pleasantries when he materialized on the New Horizons bridge. He brought 6 armed guards with him, all carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. His 3 eyes blazed with cold fury as he stared down Captain Harris. This ends now, Veltros said, his voice like ice scraping across metal. You are children playing with forces far beyond your comprehension. Surrender the relic immediately or face the consequences. Captain Harris stood his ground, arms crossed over his chest. He was shorter than the Varathian commander, less technologically advanced, representing a species that had only been in space for a few decades. But he didn't flinch. No. That single word hung in the air like a challenge. Veltros's mandibles clicked in disbelief. You dare refuse? Do you understand what you're risking? Everything. Trade agreements that feed billions of your people. Protection from hostile species that would destroy Earth without a second thought. Your entire species standing in the galactic community. All of this you throw away. For what? A dying creature that offers you nothing? It offers us the chance to do what's right, Harris said quietly. That's enough. Right? Veltros laughed, a harsh sound that made the human crew wince. There is no right. There is only efficiency. Progress. Survival of the strong. Your species will learn this lesson or you will perish. Those are your only options. While this confrontation played out on the bridge, Riley was in the medical bay, working faster than she'd ever worked in her life. Her hands shook as she attached neural interface leads to her temples. The thin wires felt cold against her skin. More leads went to specific points on the dragon's massive skull, positioned according to calculations she'd run 100 times. Dr. Grant and his medical team moved around her, preparing the Genesis Protocol nanites. Their faces were tight with worry. This was experimental technology. Dangerous technology. Using it on a living being went against every protocol, every safety regulation, every bit of common sense they had. Riley, listen to me, Dr. Grant said, his voice low and urgent. If this goes wrong, if the nanites reject the dragon's biology or if the programming has even the smallest error, it could tear the creature apart at a cellular level. And with that neural connection active, it could damage your brain too. Possibly permanently. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understand, Riley said, her voice steady even though her hands trembled. Activate the protocol. Dr. Grant hesitated for just a moment, then nodded to his team. God help us. Activating now. The Genesis Protocol nanites flooded into the dragon's system through dozens of injection points. They were microscopic, each one smaller than a blood cell, but there were billions of them. Trillions. They spread through the dragon's body like a silver tide, guided by bioneural mapping that Riley had spent hours perfecting. For a long moment, nothing happened. The monitors showed the nanites spreading, reaching every part of the dragon's massive form. Riley held her breath, her hand pressed against the dragon's cold scales. Then everything went wrong. The dragon's body convulsed violently. Its massive form thrashed, nearly breaking free of the restraints. Alarms screamed throughout the medical bay. Red lights flashed. The monitors showed chaos. The dragon's cellular structure was breaking down, rejecting the nanites with violent force. It's rejecting the nanites. Dr. Grant shouted over the alarms. The integration is failing. Riley, we have to shut it down right now. No. Riley screamed back. Pain exploded through her mind as the neural connection transmitted the dragon's agony directly into her consciousness. It felt like her brain was being torn apart. Like every nerve in her body was on fire. But she refused to break the connection. Her hands gripped the dragon's scales so hard her fingers went white. I won't let you go, she shouted, tears streaming down her face. Do you hear me? I won't give up on you. She poured everything she had into that neural connection. Every ounce of determination. Every shred of hope. Every bit of stubborn, unreasonable human refusal to accept defeat. Images flashed through her mind, memories of the dragon abandoned in that crater, alone and unwanted. Feelings of rejection and despair that had lasted for eons. You matter. Riley thought desperately, pushing the thought through the connection with all her strength. You're not obsolete. You're not worthless. You're not just some relic from a dead era. You matter. You deserve to live. You deserve to be saved. Something shifted. Deep within the dragon's ancient biology, something recognized what was happening. This wasn't just technology trying to fix broken systems. This was connection. This was love. This was a young creature from a young species refusing to let an ancient being die alone and forgotten. The dragon's body had survived eons of cosmic radiation. It had endured stellar winds that would vaporize planets. It had adapted to environments that would kill most species instantly. And now, impossibly, it began to adapt again. The thrashing slowed, then stopped. Silence fell across the medical bay, broken only by the sound of Riley's ragged breathing and the steady beep of monitors. Then, impossibly, a heartbeat. Strong. Clear. Alive. Riley's eyes went wide. The monitors showed something incredible happening. The dragon's scales began to glow, starting from where her hand touched its head and spreading outward. But it wasn't the ancient stellar radiance the dragon once had. It was something new. Something beautiful. A fusion of ancient starfire and human bioluminescence, creating patterns that had never existed before. On the bridge, Commander Veltros froze mid-sentence. Every sensor on his ship suddenly went crazy, detecting massive energy readings from the medical bay. The dragon's eyes opened fully for the first time in millennia, blazing with renewed power. Its voice, and used for countless ages, resonated through every speaker on the ship. It was deep and ancient and beautiful, carrying the weight of eons. The young one has given me what your civilization forgot: hope. The Galactic Council chamber was one of the most impressive structures in known space. It floated in neutral territory, a massive sphere constructed from materials gathered from 1,000 different worlds. Inside, representatives from 40 different species sat in a circular arrangement, each in their designated section. The chamber could hold thousands, and today every seat was filled. The massive holographic image of the stellar dragon materialized at the center of the chamber, towering over everyone present. The projection was so detailed you could see individual scales, each one glowing with that strange new light, part ancient starfire, part human technology. It was beautiful and impossible and undeniable. Riley stood on a small platform beside the projection, her hand resting on a neural link that connected her to the dragon's physical form back on the new horizon. She looked tiny next to the hologram, just a 17-year-old girl in a wrinkled uniform. But she stood straight, shoulders back, refusing to show how terrified she actually was. The chamber erupted in noise. Some council members stared in awe. Others shouted in anger. Arguments broke out in a dozen different languages. Commander Veltros stood up, his 3 eyes blazing with fury. This human violated every protocol we have. She interfered with a council decision. She risked biological contamination. She wasted resources that could have been used for productive purposes. I gave her nothing. The dragon's voice boomed through the chamber, cutting Veltros off mid-sentence. The sound was so powerful, so ancient, that every being in the room felt it in their bones. Silence fell instantly. She gave me everything. The dragon's massive holographic head turned, its eyes sweeping across the assembled species. When it spoke again, its voice carried the weight of ages. I am Kalithos, last of the architects. I have existed for longer than most of your civilizations. I watched your ancestors crawl from primordial oceans. I sang the songs that helped your suns burn bright. I guided young species through their first steps into space. Uncomfortable shifting rippled through the chamber. Everyone knew the legends of the architects, but hearing one speak was something else entirely. And when I grew old, Kalithos continued, when my body began to fail after millions of years of service, you discarded me. You left me to die alone on a barren rock, like I was nothing more than broken machinery that had outlived its usefulness. Several council members looked away, unable to meet the dragon's gaze. But this human child, Kalithos said, and warmth filled its voice, she saw value where you saw only inefficiency. She risked everything, her career, her species standing in this council, her very life, because she believed I deserved to live. Not because of what I could give her. Not because I might be useful. Simply because she believed that life, any life, has worth. An elder from the crystalline collective spoke up carefully. The architects are said to possess knowledge from the galaxy's first days. Information and wisdom that we've sought for millennia. Surely that must be shared with the council for the good of all species. Ah yes, Kalithos said, and there was something almost sad in its voice. The knowledge. That's what you really care about, isn't it? You tried to extract it from my dying mind against my will. You saw me as a database to be downloaded, not a living being to be respected. The elder fell silent. I locked that knowledge away when you tried to take it by force, the dragon continued. I would have let it die with me rather than give it to species who had forgotten the most basic lesson, that compassion matters more than efficiency. Kalithos turned its massive head toward Riley, and their neural link flooded with warmth and affection. But now I will share it freely. All of it. Every star chart, every piece of ancient wisdom, every secret from the dawn of the galaxy. I will give it as it was always meant to be given, with those who understand that wisdom must walk hand in hand with compassion. The vote came quickly after that. Humanity's full membership in the Galactic Council was granted by an overwhelming majority. The Varathians abstained, their fury barely contained, but they were outvoted by dozens of other species. 6 months passed in what felt like a heartbeat. Riley sat in the observation lounge of a brand new vessel that humanity had designed specifically for Kalithos. It was part ship, part home, with spaces large enough for a dragon and comfortable quarters for a human crew. The dragon was still recovering, still rebuilding strength, but it grew stronger every single day. They'd already visited 12 worlds together, sharing knowledge, offering guidance, helping species who were struggling. Where to next? Riley asked through their permanent neural link. There's a young species in the Andromeda sector, Kalithos replied, its mental voice warm with affection. They're struggling with their first warp drive. I thought we might offer some guidance. Perhaps prevent them from making the same mistakes others have made. Riley smiled, looking out at the stars streaming past. Sounds perfect to me. The ship's engines hummed as they prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. In that moment before the jump, Kalithos spoke again. Thank you, Riley Bennett, for teaching an old dragon that every ending can become a new beginning. Riley felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you for teaching humanity that wisdom and wonder never grow old. That age doesn't diminish value. That everyone deserves to be saved. As their ship vanished into hyperspace, Earth spun peacefully far behind them, a small blue marble in the vast darkness. That little world had reminded the entire galaxy of a truth they'd forgotten. Sometimes the greatest strength doesn't come from advanced technology or ruthless efficiency. Sometimes it comes from something much simpler. From caring when no one else will. From refusing to give up. From seeing value in things others have discarded. From being human.